It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia! A quick friendly reminder, the center channel is probably why you have to keep changing the volume while watching a movie.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends and today's host, Nick, and with me is...
Tom.
And KJ.
Great to have you back as always. Additionally, joining us as a guest for this episode is...
Ragnar.
Thanks for joining us, Ragnar. Ragnar and KJ were teachers together in a past life. Ragnar is currently a real estate agent in the New Orleans area, so if you have similar movie tastes and are thinking of buying or selling your house, give Ragnar a call. Ragnar conveniently likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. Questions in the first round will be worth 1 point, and questions in the second round will be worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. KJ, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are going back to 2018, and you know what that means. Movie Pass is in full swing. Anyone in the USA can spend $10 a month and see as many movies as you'd want in theaters on Movie Pass's dime. In the month of April 2018, my wife and I saw Ready Player One,
when I watched
Isle of
this for the
Dogs,
first
A
time.
Wrinkle in Time,
So-
and John Krasinski's third
which is,
movie,
I think, a better
Quiet
meal
Place.
to
Nick will be quizzing us
stay
today.
away
Nick,
from
what is A Quiet Place all
sound-based
about?
aliens.
I
But
thought this would be
you
a
know.
fun one to watch, or in my case,
I
rewatch,
have a
as
mix.
the sequel,
usually
A Quiet
salmon,
Place 2, will be out
but I have
within 2
some
days.
cod.
So I
eat a
thought
lot
this
of
would be a great
tilapia,
time to
whiting,
revisit the original.
things like
This
that.
film is about a family of 5, then 4, then 5 again, doing the best they can to
No,
live
no,
in
no,
a
that's not all.
post-apocalyptic setting in which the world is plagued by blind killer monsters with ultra-sensitive hearing. This movie is not to be confused with Bird Box, another 2018 post-apocalyptic
Oh no,
setting
I
in
can't
which the
have
world is
Reddit
plagued by
anymore.
monsters whose
No,
sight
just
causes
fish.
its
Just
victims
lots
to
of
take their own
different
lives.
fish.
Sensory-based
I had
monsters
swai
were all the
fillet
rage in
and
2018,
pink salmon that
it
day.
seems.
I had three.
Tom,
I had almost 4
if you
ounces
only had
of
one word
swai
to
and
describe A
about 8.5
Quiet Place,
ounces of
what would
salmon.
it be?
Family. KJ. I don't know.
Ragnar?
Waterfall.
Yeah.
And my
Mhm.
word would be unique.
It's time for question 1.
While there were a plethora of tense situations in A Quiet Place, how many on-screen fatalities occurred? To clarify, you had to see someone is dead or something.
Did you have to see them dead, or do you have to see them die?
If there is something that you see die or is dead on a screen.
Okay. Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in?
Confident KJ, start it up.
All right, so you didn't see their son die. You didn't see the raccoon die. I don't think you saw, I don't know how to say his name right, John Krasinski die. You may have seen a monster die. So I'm going to go one monster. One. My answer is one. One monster.
What is he talking about?
I thought your eyes were wide open, KJ.
They were.
That's right. Say he's a scaredy cat.
I am.
Ragnar.
I'm going to go with 5.
Tom?
Okay. In terms of seeing die or dead, people that have died or are dead, you see 4. Like are killed or are dead. Yeah.
The point goes to Ragnar. And I think there may have been, I thought I clarified, but if we could see that they were dead or were killed, and I said someone or something.
This
okay?
oh something. Ah, crap.
Okay.
This sounds
so
like drone bombing.
Both.
So
The 5 fatalities are Bo Abbott, and we do see the monster come and get him, KJ.
Yeah.
Totally.
Did we see the death?
But
Yeah.
How did you
that's-
get he gets.
We see a
Maybe the
monster
twist
come, and then
ending.
we see
All
a
the children are safe in
Then we see a
Monsterland.
cross that they're very sad about.
This is a prelude to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
Pinocchio all over.
This,
again.
so
this is
I,
where the
I
Oompa
didn't see
Loompas
this
come
movie in
from.
the theater. I
The
saw it
next
last
one
week in
is
my kitchen
the
while
raccoon.
making and
Now I put
consuming
raccoon
Ah,
slash
come on.
raccoons because I wasn't sure if it was just the one or the two. They counted as one, so I don't. I'm not really sure. I know at least one raccoon was harmed in the making of this film. The Man in the Woods.
But that was I thought that was off screen as well.
Yeah,
We hear the shot, but we don't see it. Am I wrong?
Shot.
It
Wasn't he
wasn't
shooting
shot.
something?
The monster came.
No,
rushing
the
up to
monster
get it.
came.
Oh, he screams out loud.
What movie
yes,
did you
yes.
It was,
see?
Yes.
it was pretty tasty. Felt
Ay,
Dios
healthy.
mío.
Good.
Lee Abbott,
Healthy, type
the
of fat.
monster comes
Yeah, a lot of
and
protein,
attacks
good-
him from above.
Yeah, so then I moved
And
from my
the
kitchen
monster
to my
itself.
living room and
Now,
finished
I
the movie
almost counted,
and the fish.
I could have made it 6, and I'm still going to give the points to Ragnar because he was closest. Technically, the wife of
Yeah,
the Man in
I-
the Woods, we do
I
see
haven't
all
plugged
bloody
in
there
my
too.
TV
So if you want to
in
take the raccoon out and put
7
her in, where
months,
so
so,
either way,
you know,
the closest
on the
was
computer,
Ragnar,
which
so I'm
is
gonna
not a
give him
great
the
way to
point
do
there.
it, but
And really,
also
what I
the-
thought
the
was
TV's
interesting
pretty
about
old
this
and
film, especially
you
in
know,
the horror
I don't think I
genre,
have a stand. So
they
it's, you know,
showed the
gonna be-
monster early, yet still kept the suspense, which I thought was
yeah,
very
more or less
interesting.
the
They don't
sit-
hide it. It's not Predator. We don't find out until the bitter end what it actually looks
Yeah.
like.
Sit
We get a
Indian
glimpse
style
of
on
it,
the
and all you
floor
really
and-
do is get glimpse, but enough to really understand there is a creature or a being out there. What did you think
Allah.
about how it twisted some of the
Yeah.
standard horror tropes?
Well, the suspense seems to be generated from the pregnancy. So we get the rules early on, and the rules are communicated cinematically and not with effort, not with narrative, right? Not somebody's not doing a voiceover where they say, "In the year 2020, the monster," something like that, which is just like makes you want to rip your hair out. It's done through a kind of cinematic language, which is very nice. This whole movie's done that way. But where the suspense comes from is this idea of this woman having to quietly give birth to a baby and then preserve that baby in quiet. I think that for me, that's where the suspense came from. And actually, once the baby was kind of born, I actually enjoyed the movie a lot less.
I think one thing that in horror movies, it's the monster that you fear, and of course it's the case in A Quiet Place. But I think the concept is so brilliant that what we're really afraid of is noise throughout the whole movie, and so I think that's why even them showing the monster early, we're still scared of making noise. That's what we're scared of as an audience. So I think that really was able to be sustained throughout the entire film.
I completely agree, Ragnar. And I think one of the ways they show you how afraid you should be of noise are some of the little touches they do. And I'm sure we all saw this, but on the Monopoly board, right? They're not playing with Monopoly pieces. It's with little pieces of cloth. Whenever they pour the sand and they have to walk on the sand, there's so many things that make this universe feel lived in without being too obnoxious about it. And I really enjoyed being afraid of the noise throughout this whole movie.
Yeah, absolutely. The attention to detail is just the little things like the Monopoly pieces really had a great, profound effect, because then you realize, okay, this is something, any noise is really, and then you start thinking about how would you live in that world. And then that's why I think it's a very engaging movie.
Yeah, post-apocalyptic movies do that really well, right? They kind of they force you to imagine yourself in a similar circumstance, and I think this movie does do that pretty well without the kind of without this sort of overly explaining how different things are done, right? We don't get like a lecture on how to catch fish. You just see him going and and get the fish, but you still are able to kind of transpose yourself into that world.
It's time for question 2.
Why can't the daughter, Regan, go down into the basement?
Locked in?
Locked in, but I have no idea.
Do you remember the scene? They make a big deal of her trying to go in the basement. She'll go down there.
Yeah. No, I do. I I think.
We'll talk
Well, I
about
guess
it.
what I'm trying to say is it's a good question. Why couldn't she go down in the basement?
That's why I asked it.
Yeah, I actually found that a little illegible
Yep.
in the movie. I'll say that I have an answer, but I had trouble with that.
Yep. Locked in, and it's a great question. It's one of my pet peeves of the movie. It really kind of took me out of it, but yeah, locked in.
Okay, Ragnar, we're going to start with you.
So I've seen this movie 3 times, and it wasn't only until the 3rd time that I actually put too much thought into it. The first 2 times I was just like, the movie doesn't give you an explanation, and the father makes such a big deal about it. It's just kind of like, what's going on here? The best guess I have is that due to her being deaf, she would make noise without knowing she's making noise because of all the equipment that's down there and all the stuff that could make noise that's down there.
Okay, Tom, what's your answer?
I really had the same thing. I think neither child was allowed down there, but it was because young people. There's a lot of small parts and a lot of detritus on the walls and things like that, and a child could knock that over and make a lot of noise.
KJ.
As I say, I don't know, but in my basement down here, I have areas that everybody's allowed, right? I mean, yeah, sure, but they generally don't because of. I mean, I don't tell them not to, but I want to make it clear that this is roped off from me. So I just thought, like, in a world where you can't really go that many places without, where do they get all that sand without pouring sand everywhere? Like, give the guy a basement. Like, come on. So, just personal space for John Krasinski.
Dad cave.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'm going to give KJ half a point for originality. The full points are going to go 1 point each to Tom and Ragnar. This is something that when I watched the film, I had to process because I do agree, and I think Ragnar alluded to this. That's one of the things that they don't really tie up with a bow, and you really have to think, wait a minute, why can't she go there? What's the big deal? And it does come down to noise. There's a lot of equipment and radios that she could make noises and couldn't even hear if she turned something on by accident. And yes, there's the normal tripping over dirty basement stuff, but specifically, that's where a lot of the equipment is that could make noises. Now, the reason I brought this one up is we started to talk about it a little bit or brought it up in the last question, but the silent lifestyle, Tom brought this up. It makes us think about what it would be like to live in that. I mean, I really think it transported the audience into that environment. So I really just wanted to talk a little bit about what they did right with that. If there's something they missed that was unrealistic, just what our thoughts are about the silent lifestyle.
Well, it gave the filmmakers an opportunity to tell a story in a cinematic way, in a visual way, right? We don't get a kind of lot of dialogue explaining things, and so they themselves have to sort of they have to innovate, much like the people do in these circumstances, in order to deal with the kind of generating a narrative. Actually, when they talk, the movie kind of sinks. Like when they go to the waterfall and have that kind of saccharine conversation about love or something, the movie like really dips at that point. And so I think that the silence allowed for minimalism in the film. In terms of what did they do right in order to grasp or get at deafness, I haven't studied American Sign Language. My understanding, though, is from looking at critical reviews and whatnot, is that the different characters signed in the manner of their personality. So John Krasinski's Lee signed kind of quickly and bluntly. It wasn't kind of great, it wasn't a one graceful motion into another. It was kind of more to the point. And the girl who played his daughter, who actually is deaf, sort of coached them, I think, in that way, that they would sign in character. And that sign language does have a sort of tenor to the way you do it, even though it's not vocalized.
Yeah, I think they said John signed very bluntly and Emily signed very Krasinskily. Sorry.
Not sorry.
That was a joke. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a joke.
Go ahead.
I will say, KJ's wonderful joke aside, I didn't realize that, but now that I think back, that makes sense. And I like that touch, which I was not even aware of when I was watching the film either time.
So, Nick, you asked about the basement, and there's been a few things that maybe during the movie rant I'm going to want to nitpick on this movie. But in the basement, you know, there's a white erase board. And as an engineer who loves and uses white erase boards all the time, it really bugged me that written on the dry erase board, it was something like monsters use sound. And
What is their weakness?
Yeah, what is their weakness? Monsters use sound, right?
Oh,
Yeah. And it's sort of like,
so bad.
how many years has that been there? Like, he can get rid of the white board, or he just wrote that recently again to remind himself. I mean, it was for the audience, right? That was my nitpick about
Yeah, maybe that was the sloppy exposition, right?
It still's in the background. It wasn't like they panned to it, right? Like they didn't.
They did it, but yeah, it was, it's still, I get where you're coming from. It's kind of like, yeah, we know your whole life is based on being quiet.
Well, if we want to nitpick the silent lifestyle with things that are not realistic, those cornfields were clearly planted with industrial equipment to have those clean rows and all of that. So I'll give it to them. But we know that corn that you plant in the ground doesn't grow like that unless you have assistance.
Yeah, there were some details that really, I didn't think of the corn thing. That's going deep. That's pretty good. The whiteboard with they zoom in, and I think more than once, where he writes down what is the weakness. It's like, do you really need that? Do you really need to write that? And do we need to show? It was a small detail that broke the magic for me, because they were doing such a great job with the Monopoly board and everything else. This really broke it for me. And the other one that really bugged me was the characters kept putting their finger up to their lips and going, shh. It's like, we know, we've been in this world for years or whatever it is. We know we have to be quiet, you know. So that they kept doing that. I understand for the deaf girl, that's fine, but for everybody else, doesn't make sense. And I don't know why it bugged me so much.
It made sense when the guy when Krasinski held his finger up as warning to the man who was about to scream. It was more of a signal to him to not do what he's about to do. But
After round one, Ragnar is in the lead with 2 points. Tom has 1, and KJ convinced me to award him half a point. We'll be right back after this quick break.
I know I always misplace things in the bathroom. My hair comb, my shampoo and conditioner, toilet paper, collection of Mayan tribal masks, toothpaste. What a mess. This year, clean up your act and your bathroom with the new time-saving, space-saving razor blade toothbrush. Half a face razor, half a toothbrush. The razor blade toothbrush allows you to brush your teeth and shave your face with the same instrument. Just stick the pointy end in your mouth and hit the turquoise button. Turquoise stands for toothbrush, and clean those pearly whites. Take the pointy end out and hit the lime button. Lime stands for love my razor blade toothbrush, and an incredibly sharp, straight razor shoots out, and you can remove even the thickest of hairs from your face, or, for the ladies, your legs. That's razor blade toothbrush. Pack it together.
And we're back. Ragnar, we're at the critical point of our show where we ask the guests a key question. If you could watch this movie with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
And I've been putting a lot of thought into this one, and I wish I had a great answer, but I don't, because I don't know any deaf people. That's basically my answer. I want to watch it with someone that can't hear and just get their insight onto how they live their lives and how they would live in that type of environment. So I don't know anybody, but I think that would be a very, very interesting watch where someone can give me some insights to the movie that I can't get from anyone else.
That's a great thought. Now, I'm going to bring this up in the questions to come, so I don't want to go into it too much. But for a film where they could not speak, there sure was a heck of a lot of sounds at this film. So I wonder how someone who was hearing impaired would actually experience this film. Would they be able to pick up on certain things that we didn't, or are there certain elements of this film that they would not be able to pick up on because a lot of it was auditory? So that's an interesting perspective.
I think they would be able to give me insight until, because I think it's a double-edged sword, because they know how to be quiet because they can't hear themselves, so they don't speak, and they can navigate the world like that. But they also don't know about the sounds they make, so maybe at their homes and their apartment, they're knocking things harder than they intend to. So they could tell me stuff like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that Monopoly thing or something like that. The noises that they make without knowing it could be a big detriment to them in that world.
Yeah, I would think the same thing would be that, hearing is actually quite a skill to have in this world. What enables the Abbott family is that they all have to know sign language for their daughter. They've all learned this. So they're just able to continue using language without pause, which seems to give them a sort of evolutionary advantage. But in terms of the youngest daughter, like, she's never heard a door open, right? Like how loud you're supposed to do that or whatnot. And the level of sound you're able to make seems to be very, very low in this movie. I mean, if you can't tap Monopoly pieces, you you have to be rather subtle with your movements.
I read the IMDb trivia, and one of the things it said was originally they weren't going to have subtitles for the sign language, and in one of the last screenings they added that in, and they said it just made a very big difference.
I can imagine.
Yeah, they didn't need to be there.
Yeah,
I think what they could have done, if they're kind of trying to immerse you more, is some of the action scenes, in particular the one in the pickup truck towards the end. When you see it through the girl's point of view, you see this monster attacking the truck and you don't hear anything. And that was terrifying. And then I was hoping that they would keep the whole scene like that, which I think would have been very effective, but they kept kind of going out of it and you can hear the monster. So I think keeping it in her perspective where you can't hear anything would have been very effective, more so, or more immersive, I should say, than not having subtitles for the signing.
It's time for question 3.
Sign language and whispers go a long way in this world. At what timestamp do we first hear verbal communication at a normal speaking decibel level?
I'm going to lock in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
KJ, start us up.
45 minutes.
I'm going to say 34 minutes.
I wrote down 36 minutes.
Okay. The points, 2 points, go to Ragnar. This occurred at almost exactly the 38-minute mark in this hour and 30-minute runtime film. And I believe you could probably share with me what scene it was, Ragnar.
At the river.
The waterfall
the
specifically,
son,
but yeah.
The waterfall. Yeah, the waterfall. When he's saying, it's safe, trust me.
Exactly.
And they holler like lunatics.
Exactly. And this is where I didn't want to go too much into it in our question earlier there, but there was a lot of sound in this film. So I thought it was very interesting that even though we fear noise, we hear noise and sound throughout the whole movie. Tom, one of your favorite words is coming up in this one. Diegetics, huh? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, they really don't play with kind of diegetic sound too much. I mean, one thing you mentioned, Ragnar, was jumping into the not the little girl, but the daughter's POV, at which point the diegetic irony here is that there is no diegetic sound, right? And outside of that, though, the soundscape was fairly normal. We're actually more interested in absence than in inclusion, I would say, right? I mean,
Yeah, but then the punctuation of every sound was awesome. And actually, Tom, I know you're a big fan of De Palma's movie Blowout.
mhm.
I was hoping for more of this type of stuff in Blowout. Like so when I the what when I watched this for this time, I had my good headphones on and listened, and I loved all the different sounds that I heard during the movie. It was great. It was a audiomatic experience.
Yeah, I don't know if Tom, if you heard all of that or if you had the volume pumped up, because there is a lot actually going on. Even though dialogue is absent, there is a ton of sound throughout this film, which jumped out a lot at me too.
Sure, there's a ton of sound. What is, in terms of kind of modulating between diegetic sound and an included sound or soundtrack sound, what did you find that jumped out at you or helped situate you?
I don't know about every time they jumped into Reagan's POV, but when we weren't in Reagan's POV, the sounds we heard were very well foliaged, very well made, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. Is why I'm bringing up Blowout. Like that's what I thought we were gonna get these high quality sound bites, and because they were up against the absence of sound, it was even more stark and more obvious that these sounds were occurring.
Here's a way to articulate it. Whenever there were certain sounds, I became fearful, was that sound too loud? So for example, they were coming out of the storefront and there was rustling of newspapers, okay, that were sitting there in like a stand. And I'm like, is that too much sound? Is that going to be a problem? What are we going to do? Like, so that's what I mean by the effectiveness of sound in this so-called silent society or silent lifestyle. It just was amazing to me that I was embedded in the actual film, worrying about everything I heard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a function of the narrative, right? You're nervous about, what you're going to hear or whatnot. And by virtue of the narrative, the normal sounds of the world become vital.
They demand your attention,
Yeah.
and I think I think we should attribute that to the Foley artist.
Okay.
I think if we had less quality sound while watching this, I don't think the film would have worked.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of attention to detail, and I think Krasinski builds that drama. I agree with that. Yeah,
I agree that the sounds were all fantastic. They did with less, they did more, I think. One of the things that bothered me a little bit, and I understand why it was done, was the unnatural, what's the word I'm looking, increase in sound of oh man, I'm not displaying this. All right, so when they're playing Monopoly, the sound is natural. You hear everything that it is as is in the world, but then the kid accidentally knocks over the lamp and it makes a gigantic sound, and I was listening to it in my surround sound speaker, so it just like shook the room. And it is to indicate to the audience, hey, that's dangerous. But it broke the spell of like everything being as it is in the world. It just felt like a cheap scare.
I'll give them poetic license on that one. I don't know. I liked everything else going on, but I get what you're saying. The realism may have been inaccurate.
Yeah, I wish they stuck to it a little bit more and avoided less of the horror tropes. They even had flashing lights. When the aliens would come near. It's just that's another horror trope of the flashing lights that don't quite work. So I thought the movie was kind of like better.
It's time for question 4.
How many in-movie days do we experience as an audience?
Oh, locked in.
Locked in.
So Nick, are you asking, like, they told us it was this many days, it was this many days, it was this many days, and you want us to subtract? Or do you want us to say, well, we know that was a day, and that was a day, and that was a day, so maybe 3-ish? you see what
I
I'm
want
trying?
to
I'm
know
not saying
how many
3,
days. How many days occurred? I'm not subtracting anything. If we've seen a piece of a day, you've seen that day. Does that answer your question?
but no, because the movie starts and says X amount of days since something. And then later on it says Y amount of days since something. Do you want
No,
that
no. I want
total?
the actual amount of days we experience.
Okay, got it.
Oh, so we don't include those like 400 and odd days.
Yes, we're not counting not the elapsed time from when these creatures came to where the movie ended. How many in movie days do we experience as an audience?
Locked in.
I'm still locked in. I understood.
Okay.
I'm,
Tom, were you
I'm not a damn fool.
When you say day, do you mean?
Do you
What do you
mean
mean by
year by
experience?
day? Or...
Sun's up?
Mhm. If we were on Mars,
Yeah.
KJ.
3. There was the day they went shopping. That was a rough day. There was the day that we see and a lot happens, like they go to the waterfall. They're not allowed in the basement. And then that night they have some fireworks. And then the next day, I'm assuming we see. So 3.
3. Copy paste what KJ said.
yeah, I had 3. I had day 89 and 472 and 473.
Tom has it exact, but everyone gets the points.
But you were eating fish.
He can read.
He's 30% deaf, but he can read. He just can't spell debt.
Hey, he heard my question perfectly, okay? So the answer is 3. And this is really what I want to get into, quality versus quantity. What we did see was very impactful. And what I thought was really interesting about this film, I was watching it with my wife, and we're at like maybe the minute 45 mark on this film. And she's like, isn't this the end of the movie? I'm like, no, this sequence just goes on for like half the movie. It's like it's the suspense and the action, which was crazy to me. I just didn't really pay attention to it, I guess, the first watch. But literally, it was like 45 minutes in, and we realized this is the end sequence unfolding for the next half of the movie.
Yeah, it rides. It does ride. And the collapse time also helps too, because the movie isn't that interested in world building, blessedly. In apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic movies, there's so much world building very often. You could think of the Terminator movies with their Skynet and freaking time travel ironies and all that. This movie is far more interested in family and the familiar, and by keeping everything condensed, it forces them to focus on these people and their relationships while also keeping the tension very high. That aided in keeping like the heart rate racing. But I think the real benefit was having these characters remain close together. I think that kind of ran out of steam for me with some of the more saccharine scenes, which kind of are kind of hair pulley. But the compressed time, especially centered around the pregnancy, worked quite well.
I think that by limiting the amount of action sequences, because there was the one at the beginning, and then, like you said, the last 40
Yeah.
odd minutes, that sandwich that they're in between, it's a lot of character development that I think sometimes moves into sentimentality a little bit. But for a horror movie, it's a lot. It's a lot of great character building, and so once you have characters that you like and you care about, you only need that one action scene because you as an audience are completely engaged in it, rather than like, every 10 minutes somebody gets killed off. It's just not that effective compared to what A Quiet Place did.
It's a similar pattern to The Matrix, isn't it? Matrix starts with that one action scene, and then you have the training, and then everything after that kind of takes place in the Matrix until the end. It's once they go try to find Morpheus or whatever it is.
A lot of the a lot of the Matrix
This still
though
felt faster paced, which is amazing for me to say, because at the time I would have thought the Matrix was faster paced. But
this is also so much shorter than the Matrix. And you're getting less information. I mean, this is like 90 minutes long. I don't even think that. Matrix has got to be 2 hours. Right?
It's actually, I think you're on spot on. It's an hour 30-minute runtime.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, it's the Matrix also does this thing with world building, which, I mean, we're calling this movie a horror movie, and fair enough, it has a lot of those tropes, but it also does have the kind of science fiction-y thing of like the world is ended, and I do think it also falls under the kind of post-apocalyptic uh, thing. I'd compare it to like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. That's the first one. I get the names of them. I think it's Night, Dawn, Day. Is that right? Anyway, yeah, okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Which also is a movie which has very, very simple world building and a condensed space in which you're in. That movie is nowhere near as good as this. That movie doesn't have as nearly as good acting. It's not nearly as conscientious as this film. This movie actually is quite beautiful to look at times. When you see John Krasinski's character Lee lighting the fire, it's a really beautiful shot towards the beginning of the movie. But they both have the similarity that's sets them apart from the Matrix, in which the social dynamic is far more important than the world building. The world building just isn't really a thing in either of those pictures. And you could compare it to like The Walking Dead, where the world building is far more important. And a lot of The Walking Dead is about our main characters walking into different worlds, right? Walking into different communities and how that's constructed. Here, it's really about the farm. And the fact the whole thing takes place on a farm, I think speaks more to that familial thing. It's a small life, a family life, a return to the farm, a return to agriculture, a kind of safety in that this really what was like kind of and I wrote this in my notes, is sort of a Jeffersonian idea of how life would be, right? It would be families on farms, and that's where independence and safety comes from, right? We think of, that's where kind of safety from tyranny comes from, and that's where their safety comes from, is this focus on just the group of people and the farm life.
This is a bit of a tangent, but one of the things I'm actually concerned about with the sequel, I don't think this movie was designed for a sequel. The thing that really made this movie special was that it kept it small. And all of a sudden now we're going to be thrown into a giant world building experience, which I'm going to see it. I'm going to see what it's all about. I mean, they're going to get my money. Let's be honest here. But that is my concern when you take something, even the way this film ends on a question mark. Yes, we know they now have a secret weapon. And of course we got a, obligatory pump the shotgun, to say, hey, we're going to take care of this. What a wonderful ending. Now it's going to branch out, and I'm concerned.
And you could even see with the trailer, right? They're talking like, the only people left are the people you don't want to save. That kind of.
Yeah. And I just don't want it to lose what made it so special. And it still probably will be enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. But this movie did not look like they were trying to build a franchise. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Nick, I think that's spot on. I think everything that made this movie special is kind of the opposite of what's going to happen in the sequel. It's a unique movie, a kind of a first time you see a magic trick. So the second time, it's not going to be that great. And it's unorthodox in that it's a post-apocalyptic horror movie that is not about the banding realms of humans at their worst. It's more like a humanitarian, the family together. These are humans almost at their best fighting this horror. And now we're going to get the Mad Max, The Road again, but this time you can't make noise. So I think it's going to go from something very unique to less character development, more scares, less originality.
Yeah, I'm also nervous about the sequel, and I really wish they called it A Quieter Place. How peaceful does that sound? Like
the quietest place to wrap it up.
The
quietest place is just death. Yeah.
You can't even sign. That's too loud.
We can't hear you sign.
Your hands get chopped off. That's the quietest place.
In the quietest place, no one can hear you sign.
Looks like Ragnar's taking this one down with 6 points. Tom following up with 3, and KJ on the board with 2.5. So congratulations, Ragnar.
It's time for Movie Rent.
So I did have a bonus question, just in case we came to the need, which we didn't. So I figured I'd throw it out there anyway. And it may be a little bit outside the movie, but we'll see. The question is, can you drown in corn kernels? This is a
You could
true
be.
or false, or yes or no.
I was gonna say yes. You could be people like there's like 20 or 30 people who die in.
I want to get everyone else's opinion.
Okay. I've actually looked this up before seeing the movie.
Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah. I don't know if it's how the mechanics of it, like whether you have too many, you swallow too many, or you just suffocate. I don't know, but I would say yeah.
Yeah, if your lungs were full of corn kernels, you're not going to be breathing.
No.
So I don't know. I don't know if you're being funny with the word drown, but yeah, I think you would die if you were stuck in the corn kernels.
I'm referring to the scene where they sink in the corn kernels like quicksand. So technically, yes, there's something referred to as either grain entrapment or grain engulfment. Usually it occurs when somebody, if you're in like a silo situation, is taking corn kernels out the bottom, so it creates a disparity. And then you can get sucked in, and you actually almost get crushed because you can't breathe. And it doesn't take much for you to get stuck. Even if you're like your lower part of your leg, like people can't pull you out. There's another thing that happens when there's, I don't know, the corn isn't in good shape. It's almost diseased. It creates almost these empty cavities or voids. So something may look like it's flat and then you get stuck in it. So I did look this one up to see how realistic. I think the scene that's portrayed in the film is actually not realistic when they fall in there and immediately sink, unless the bottom was open and corn was being pulled out and there's a suction pulling them down. But this is something that apparently Tom, not watching this movie, but still just for his own general enjoyment, decided to look up of how many people have tragedies with being stuck or drowning in corn.
I think it was like a Dr. John's bathroom reader, one of those that kind of
Nice.
inspired me on, weird deaths and whatnot. But yeah, they sure do fall in corn.
So the answer is it was inspired by things that could happen, but not necessarily the way that specific scene would.
Yeah, you would need kind of like an air pocket. Yeah, create like a press down, I guess, I suppose. Yeah.
The whole time I was watching the movie, I'm like, are all the dogs dead?
Yeah, probably.
Oh yeah,
I would think so.
They're all like, yeah, I mean, they're all gone.
well,
Although it's surprising that those raccoons made it that long.
they're pretty quiet. But in the sequel, I
they're-
guarantee there's a dog that can't bark, and that's gonna be the last dog, right?
Yeah.
Some dogs are out there worth saving.
Yeah.
Oh man, I hope. Oh,
Quiet
man.
Place 2.
If there is,
The good boy.
KJ.
Yeah. A surface animal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can see cats still kind of like, they're like, hey, let's be quiet about this, but dogs, no way.
Yeah, they're probably all gone.
So one of the things this movie did remind me of was Passion of Joan of Arc.
Passion of the Joan of Arc.
Passion of the Joan of the Arc. There's a particular scene where Reagan, I think, is in her bedroom, and they're constantly zooming in on her face, and it just gave me Joan of Arc vibes from the movie we had done previously. And I there's some pretty corny John Krasinski things where he does these dramatic pauses. It was, I mean, he directed it, right? So he must have really wanted to do these dramatic pauses, and those didn't work quite as well. But again, it kind of reminded me of the Passion of Joan of Arc.
That's a hard sell for me because that is so impactful that in the Passion that I didn't go there. But yeah, I could see maybe with the daughter because there's an absence of sound, and that's where we're getting that silent film vibe from. I didn't get it from the father figure at all, though, but maybe the daughter. But that you're referencing something that is really something special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say also that Joan of Arc is interested in making, I keep using the word legible, but making legible faces and illegible sets, or the space they're in. The space they're in Joan of Arc is really kind of hard to read. The faces aren't, right? That's why we're so close to them. Here, the surroundings need to be legible because something can come out from anywhere, right? Once a noise is there. And so by being in the woods and being in the farm, which is, it has these whatever 7-foot high corn stalks, it creates these kind of this curtaining effect where the monster can be behind any tree, any bit of corn, any space. And so you really want this kind of mid-level shot where you're capturing the individuals and the space surrounding them, because that's where the tension is balanced.
Do you remember her bedroom?
I don't remember her bed. What was in her bedroom?
And I think that's the scene. I think they didn't show you her bedroom. I think they did the Joan of Arc idea where they did keep it close on her face. They didn't show you the bedroom. They didn't make it a spot where the monster could jump out. It was a safe spot where she had a chance to be sad about feeling like she was neglected by her dad.
Is that when she like packs up to go visit her brother's
when she goes for the
grave?
runaway. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the room. I remember her going,
Exactly.
That's KJ's point.
Is that, you don't see the space. But what would be, what's the intention there?
I think to show she's struggling emotionally because she blames herself for her brother's death and is desperate for the approval and acknowledgement of her father.
Yeah, she's isolated. Mm-hmm. So she's a person who's not in the farm space in the same way the other ones are, because she feels, personally responsible. Okay. I don't really see the Joan of Arc thing. I think Joan of Arc is doing something, I think Dreyer is doing something else with those close-ups. But I get the idea of being that the kind of zoom in signals isolation. And I suppose you could say Joan is isolated in Joan of Arc, right? She's isolated from the accusers. There's just, there seems to be, it may be the case that close-ups kind of help with isolation, right? That's what they do. I feel like the callback to Joan of Arc, I don't know. That's a bit much for me to swallow. But I think the idea of isolation makes sense as a close-up, as being communicated via close-up.
So the other question I had, right? We're in a world where you can't make noise unless you're next to a waterfall. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you're next to a waterfall, waterfalls create white noise and you can talk. Humans are surprisingly good at making white noise. I have a white noise machine up in my bedroom to help me sleep. And they have consistent power. They have very reliable power. Why not create white noise bubbles all over the place and live a relatively normal life where the monsters can't see you? They're blind in the white noise bubbles. In fact, if you're really clever, you might be able to make a white noise perimeter and keep extending that and extending that and extending that until you get like little city states where the monsters won't cross the white noise fence, so to say. And it would have made for a terrible movie, and it doesn't really matter. And maybe that's what A Quieter Place is all about, is setting up these white noise fences.
Yeah.
Well, that gets a little bit more into world building, but if we go down that path, we also don't know where they're getting this unlimited supply of power. I would think that they have a finite resource. Say they have solar, say they have something going on. It probably doesn't have the amount of power that they need to create that consistently going. Maybe it's enough to maintain when we got to flick the red lights on for a warning. So I would say, even though they don't do a lot of world building, that may be a restriction. That's just the way I would look at it. Even the things that they have running, they don't have everything going. It's just the basic equipment that they need for monitoring and whatnot. But that's my thought there, of how they try to contain the power usage to block out that kind of sophistication.
I guess that would be the most important thing, though, right?
I would do that over red and white lights. You wouldn't need the red lights anymore.
Yeah, but this caught everyone off guard. We don't know how much decimation they had before people could get organized. Yeah,
it's been over a year.
It's been
how many are left?
73 days.
How many are left? That's the thing. And maybe we're gonna find out in the sequel. I mean, but that's a
John
whole nother
Krasinski
story.
is building an earpiece for his deaf daughter by reading encyclopedias. It is a lot easier to generate something that goes like, I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think KJ has a point.
Mhm.
I mean, even if it's about the white noise perimeter, that one seems a little bit weird. But but I mean, it just conceptually, why isn't she giving birth? Why aren't they planning for her to give birth near the waterfall?
Yeah, that'll make a lot more
That
sense.
actually is a good point.
Yeah.
No, why aren't
I
they
think
building a
why didn't
nursery
they
next
build
to
a
the waterfall?
perimeter around her that just constantly kept going?
I mean,
It's
Yeah.
like
why not build the dwelling
Because
next to the waterfall and then go to the
the
farm for the food?
waterfall.
Mhm.
The waterfall is a big. It causes a big problem for the movie, I think, and more so than what it adds to the movie, which is just a small moment for the father and I think them at the river being able to whisper is fine.
Mhm.
I think the waterfall really kind of screws things up, and I guarantee you there's going to be a waterfall in a second.
So the waterfall is called back when she gives birth and the monster comes in. She's able to avoid losing the baby to the monster because she goes under where the water is falling in the basement. So that's sort of narratively.
You're right.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So you need it for that.
But I think the fireworks sets that up. Like, we get it. Like, larger sound protects smaller sounds, and I think the fireworks do a much better job than the waterfall does.
Yeah.
The river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just leave it at the river.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a problem with the waterfall, but
yeah, and it's also the scene isn't very good either, right? You
Right.
you get this kind of this trek when they have this conversation.
I think what works probably the best, in my opinion, for this movie is the cinematography. It's just absolutely next level. It's so beautiful, so lush, so dynamic, but without being flashy. My favorite shot, what probably is my favorite shot, is right at the beginning when the kid has the rocket, how everyone slowly turns, and then when you see the kid get swiped by the monster, and then his father is in the scene, in the shot. I thought that was just wonderful, and the cinematographer, I'm sure I'm butchering her name, Charlotte Christensen, is, you guys, if you haven't seen The Hunt or any of her other movies, she's phenomenal at what she does.
Yeah, it was great. And it didn't feel like a Marvel movie where it forced you to watch it because cut.
Mm-hmm.
It drew your eye into the right spot on the screen, the right direction they wanted you to go. Yeah, it was. I agree, Ragnar.
Yeah, it's well blocked. One example of this, I think, is when you have the old man, and the way that we see this, we see from the boy's level. The camera is centered on the boy, and the father, Lee, is walking ahead of him, and so the boy is at like mid back level, and we see something blurry in the background stand up, and the boy just smacks into his father's back because he doesn't notice it. And you're able to get, not just with the cinematography, but also with the way the actors are blocked in the space too. You're able to communicate there's a threat here that this kid doesn't see, and him falling into his father's back then is able to communicate that. Yeah, they're able to communicate a lot with the way people are moving in the space. Even the whole Monopoly board thing, right? Where that, I mean, it's a little overdone, whoosh, and that's, I'm not quite sure why they have a lamp even, but since they have lights on, but the whole thing kind of communicates without communicates very economically. It's a very economic movie. In those 90 minutes, and in the plot, there isn't very much plot. There's a situation, and they're dealing with this kind of perpetual situation. Although I actually think it kind of gets gradually sillier as we go along, from like the nail onward. I did like the earpiece ending. That was a lot of fun. And that was also the beats there were very solid. Her taking the thing off, putting it against the mic, it ending on the shotgun crank was a lot of fun. I think though that like I love you, I've always loved you, that scene, then he screams, was kind of awful, actually. I think even like the communication at the waterfall, it also raises the additional question of why didn't he bring his daughter along, which he does seem to blame her for what happened. And we don't really have him forgiving her thing, because the movie's far too saccharine to allow him to actually be legitimately angry at her, right? It doesn't really seem to know what it wants to do. We're like, not, there's no reason for him not to bring her along. And if we didn't have that conversation, we would assume he was angry at her, and in the end he forgave her, got over it or something. But since we have that waterfall conversation, we're stuck in this kind of land of he's angry at her, or he's not angry at her, or something like that. And she realizes too, not to go on and on, she realizes too he's not angry at her because she goes into the basement and sees the earpieces, right? She realizes how much care he has put into improving her life, which also sends the message not of forgiveness, but he always loved me, which is far less interesting.
Maybe if he used the whiteboard to help him figure it out. This last
I still love her. Not
the
her fault.
earpiece. The engineering.
No. Do I still love her? Yes.
Still love her, yes. Circled with arrows pointing at it.
Why? Yeah.
We can't finish this episode without addressing the nail, okay? Something that had so much impact, and you literally felt it going in her foot, and then it brought me so much dismay that nobody removed the nail. They didn't push it down. So it was so impactful and then so frustrating to me throughout the remainder of the film as people kept going up and down the stairs and not addressing this exposed nail. So I just had to at least bring it up. As something I enjoyed so much frustrated me. They could just bend it down. Like,
but she
stick it up.
She stepped on the nail, and then the monster came. And that was it. Right?
No, there's other scenes when they're running back down to the basement
to avoid more monsters, right? They're not like.
No, there's a quiet part in A Quiet Place after she gives birth that they have time to address things. Because the time she steps on it,
they don't. No, the baby. There's a crying baby.
They go to a different basement. They go to like that bunker that they set up.
Yeah. Because they have to get the oxygen.
Same as the basement, right?
Yeah, or the knockout oxygen, whatever it is. Yeah.
I know what you're saying, but at the same time, it was really frustrating seeing the whole family go up and down those stairs barefoot after she already stepped on it. And she didn't like address it at all. So it's just
she points it at him, but it is a little it's a little it is a little contrived, right?
Yeah. It was I liked when it happened the first time, but then I was just kind of like annoyed by it that it's just there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's how A Quiet Place 2 will start. Like, let's get that nail.
Well, they were hoping the monster would step on the nail.
Yeah.
Well, The Quiet Place 2, it looks like they're going to leave the farm and go elsewhere, but I don't know why. Can you not run the farm anymore without?
I would like to see, and I'm sure I'll see it soon, in a few days, what the catalyst is to leave, because they have a nice little bubble there. So, but we'll see. Maybe it's the aftermath of all the noise from taking care of some of the monsters. I'd like to once again congratulate our winner of the week, Ragnar. Great job. And I actually mean it.
Hey. Oh, thanks, guys.
On another note, check out our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com, for more information about us and our episodes. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel. We are extremely grateful for any positive reviews, as those help others like you find us. If you like what you hear, remember to like and subscribe to our show. Who do you think is the most likely person on our podcast to survive a quiet place environment, and why? Let's continue the conversation on Twitter at Talking Studios. Have additional thoughts? Email us at talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com or give us a call at 201-467-8679 for a chance to be featured on one of our future From the Listeners episodes. Thanks again, Ragnar, for joining us today. Where can people find you?
People can find me on Facebook. Just search Ragnar Carlson and you'll find me.
You can find me on Twitter at ThomasLehman15, and also check out our other podcast, Talking Pictures Trivia B-Side, where we're doing a B-Side for this film.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we start our summer blockbuster series and discuss Tom's summer blockbuster recommendation from 1925, Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush. Should be a fun one. See you then.
Ding, 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 ding.